The distant howl of a coyote pierced the twilight air as Olivia Matthews slumped against her wagon wheel, watching the last golden rays of sunlight disappear behind the rugged horizon of the Colorado Territory. Her trembling hands searched the empty food sack once more, as if somehow a morsel might materialize from the worn burlap. Nothing. 3 days since the last crumbs of hardtack had passed her lips, and the crushing reality of her situation was becoming impossible to ignore. It was 1873, and the promise of land and a fresh start had lured Olivia west after the influenza epidemic had claimed her parents in Pennsylvania. At 23, she had sold everything but what would fit in a single wagon, determined to claim the homestead her late uncle had written about in his letters. But now, with her horse gone lame 2 days prior and her supplies depleted, the dream seemed to be evaporating like morning dew under the harsh western sun. Olivia's stomach cramped painfully, and she clutched at her midsection, grateful at least that she had found water earlier that day. The small creek had been a blessing, but water alone wouldn't sustain her much longer. She gazed across the vast expanse of prairie grass waving in the evening breeze, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. The sound of approaching hoofbeats startled her from her misery. Instinctively, her hand went to the small revolver tucked in her skirt pocket, her father's parting gift. Out here, strangers could mean salvation or destruction, and a woman alone couldn't be too careful. A silhouette appeared on the horizon, a lone rider making steady progress toward her camp. As the figure drew closer, Olivia could make out a man astride a chestnut quarter horse, his broad shoulders hunched slightly forward as if carrying an invisible weight. His face was obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, but even from a distance, the weariness in his posture was unmistakable. "Hello, the camp." The man's voice carried across the distance, following proper prairie etiquette by announcing himself before riding too close. Olivia straightened her back, one hand still on her revolver. "Hello," she called back, her voice cracking from thirst despite the water she'd drunk earlier. The rider approached slowly, giving her ample time to assess him. When he was about 20 feet away, he stopped and removed his hat, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, but with eyes so startlingly blue they seemed to capture what little light remained in the sky. "Madam," he nodded respectfully. "Saw your campfire from a ways off. Wanted to make sure everything was all right. Not often you see someone stopped out here, especially with a wagon that ain't moving." Olivia hesitated, years of Eastern propriety warring with her desperate circumstances. "My horse went lame," she finally admitted. "I've been trying to rest her, but I fear she won't recover enough to pull the wagon again." The stranger's gaze shifted to the mare tethered nearby, clearly favoring her front leg. He nodded knowingly, then returned his attention to Olivia. His eyes narrowed slightly as he took in her pallor. "When's the last time you ate, madam?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks despite her hunger. My supplies ran out 3 days ago. I had hoped to reach the next settlement by now." The man shook his head slightly. "Next proper town is Fort Collins. That's still a good 30 miles northeast." He dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. "Name's Daniel Reid. Most folks call me Dane." "Olivia Matthews," she replied, finally releasing her grip on the revolver. There was something trustworthy in his straightforward manner. Dane led his horse closer, and Olivia could now see the dust coating his clothes, the frayed edges of his coat, and the multiple patches on his canvas pants. This was a man who lived rough, who knew the land. "Miss Matthews, I don't mean to presume, but I've got some jerky and beans in my saddlebag. Not much of a supper, but I'd be happy to share." Her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl at the mention of food. Olivia felt a flush of embarrassment, but Dane pretended not to notice as he busied himself with the buckles on his saddlebag. "That's very kind, Mr. Reid, but I couldn't possibly, out here, refusing food when you're hungry isn't noble. It's foolish," he interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "And out here, folks help each other. It's how we all survive." Something in the simple truth of his words broke through Olivia's resistance. She nodded gratefully, and Dane went about gathering twigs and dried grass to build up her small fire. His movements were efficient, practiced, speaking of countless nights spent under the open sky. As the flames grew brighter, Olivia got her first proper look at Daniel Reid. He was older than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his early 30s, with streaks of silver threading through his dark brown hair at the temples. A scar ran along his jawline, and his hands were calloused from years of hard work. Despite the obvious signs of a difficult life, there was a gentleness in the way he moved, a consideration in his actions that spoke of his character. Dane pulled a small pot from his pack, along with a canvas-wrapped bundle. "It's not much," he said apologetically as he laid out his meager provisions. A small pouch of beans, some dry jerky, and half a loaf of bread that had seen better days. "Been on the trail longer than I planned." "It looks wonderful," Olivia said sincerely, her mouth watering at the sight of actual food. Dane filled the pot with water from his canteen, added the beans, and set it over the fire. As they waited for the beans to cook, he offered her a piece of jerky. Olivia tried to eat slowly, to savor each bite, but hunger overrode her manners. Dane simply handed her another piece without comment. "What brings you out this way, Miss Matthews?" he asked, poking at the fire with a stick. "This ain't exactly traveled country for a woman alone." Olivia swallowed her food before answering. "My uncle homesteaded a plot near the Cache La Poudre River. He died last winter, and the land passed to my father, who passed soon after. There's nothing left for me back east, so I decided to claim the homestead." Dane nodded thoughtfully. "The Poudre Valley's good land. Your uncle chose well." He stirred the beans, which were beginning to release a mouth-watering aroma. "But it's rough country too. Not easy for anyone, especially someone starting out alone." "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Reid," Olivia said with a hint of defensiveness. A small smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt that, madam. Anyone who makes it this far from Pennsylvania has grit. But even the strongest need help sometimes." They fell into a comfortable silence as Dane continued preparing their simple meal. When the beans were ready, he divided them between 2 tin cups, giving Olivia the larger portion despite her protests. He tore the bread in half as well, and they ate as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The food, though simple, was the most satisfying meal Olivia could remember. As her immediate hunger subsided, she became more aware of her surroundings and of the man sitting across the fire. Despite his trail-worn appearance, there was a quiet dignity about him. He ate methodically, savoring each bite as if it might be his last, his eyes occasionally scanning the horizon out of habit. "Thank you," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I'm not sure what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Dane set his empty cup down. "No need for thanks. Like I said, out here we look after one another." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "If you don't mind my asking, what's your plan now? With your horse lame and supplies gone?" The question brought Olivia crashing back to her reality. I'm not sure," she admitted. "I thought Ginny might recover with rest, but it's been 2 days, and she's not improving." Dane glanced over at the mare. "Mind if I take a look at her?" "Please." Olivia nodded, grateful for his expertise. She watched as he approached the horse slowly, speaking to her in low, soothing tones. His hands moved gently over the animal's leg, feeling for heat and swelling. After a thorough examination, he returned to the fire with a grim expression. "It's her tendon. She won't be pulling that wagon anytime soon, if ever." He said it plainly, without sugarcoating, but his eyes held sympathy. Olivia felt tears threatening, but forced them back. Crying wouldn't solve anything. "I see," she said, her voice tight. Dane was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "My ranch is about a day's ride from here," he said finally. "It's not much, but there's a spare bedroom. You could rest up, figure out your next steps." Olivia's eyes widened at his offer. "Your ranch? I thought you were just passing through." "Been working my own spread for about 5 years now. It's small, but it's mine. Was coming back from delivering some horses to an army outpost when I spotted your fire." He looked up at her, his expression earnest. "I know it's not proper, inviting a lady you just met to your home. But I've got a neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, about 2 miles down. Widowed last year. She could chaperone if that would make you more comfortable." The sincerity in his offer was unmistakable, but Olivia hesitated. She'd left everything familiar behind to forge her own path, to be independent. Accepting help from this stranger felt like admitting defeat before she'd even begun. As if reading her thoughts, Dane added, "It's just until you get your bearings, Miss Matthews." I'm not suggesting you abandon your plans. Just adjust your timeline a bit. Olivia looked around at her disabled wagon, her lame horse, and the vast, unforgiving landscape surrounding them. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Thank you, Mr. Reid. I accept your offer. Relief flashed across his face, quickly replaced by practicality. We'll need to pack what we can on my horse. The rest will have to leave with the wagon for now. I can come back for it once you're settled. They spent the next hour sorting through Olivia's belongings, identifying what was essential and what could wait. It was a painful process, deciding which pieces of her past life to potentially abandon, but Dane's practical advice helped guide her choices. In the end, they packed her clothing, a few cherished books, her mother's silver hairbrush, and the crucial papers establishing her claim to her uncle's land. As they worked, Olivia found herself studying Dane when he wasn't looking. Despite his rough exterior, there was a thoughtfulness to him that she found intriguing. He handled her possessions with care, respecting that each item, however insignificant it might seem, could hold meaning for her. What about Jenny? Olivia asked as they secured the last bundle to Dane's saddle. I can't just leave her. Dane considered the mare. We'll bring her along. She can walk without the wagon, and the rest might do her good. If the tendon's not too badly damaged, she might recover enough for light riding, even if she can't pull a wagon again. With their preparations complete, they extinguished the fire and secured the wagon as best they could. Dane helped Olivia mount his horse, then took the reins to lead them on foot, with Jenny following behind. They traveled slowly through the night, guided by the clear, star-filled sky. The rhythmic sound of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a night bird were the only sounds breaking the silence. How did you come to ranch out here, Mr. Reid? Olivia asked after they had been traveling for some time. Dane glanced up at her, his face half illuminated by moonlight. Came west after the war. Fought for the Union, though that don't matter much out here. Worked as a trail hand. Saved every penny. 5 years ago, found a patch of land nobody wanted because they said it was too rocky for farming. Turns out it's perfect for cattle. You built it all yourself. Every fence post, every board in the cabin. There was unmistakable pride in his voice. It's not fancy, but it's solid. Gets me through the winters. And you're there alone? No family? Olivia asked, then immediately regretted the personal nature of her question. Forgive me, that's none of my business. Nothing to forgive, Dane replied easily. And no family. Had a younger brother, but lost him at Antietam. Parents passed before the war. Been on my own since. The simple statement held volumes of unspoken loss, and Olivia felt a surge of connection to this solitary man who, like her, had faced the world alone. I'm sorry about your brother, she said softly. Dane nodded his acknowledgement, but didn't elaborate further. They continued through the night, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and stretch their legs. By dawn, Olivia was exhausted, struggling to stay upright in the saddle. Noticing her fatigue, Dane called for a longer break beside a small stream. We'll rest here for a couple hours, he decided, helping her down from the horse. We're making good time. Should reach the ranch by midday. Too tired to argue, Olivia gratefully sank onto the soft grass. Dane unsaddled his horse to let it graze more comfortably, then checked on Jenny's leg again. When he returned to Olivia's side, he offered her his canteen and another strip of jerky. You should sleep, he suggested. I'll keep watch. What about you? She asked, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. You've been walking all night. I've gone longer without rest, he assured her. Trail habit. Sleep when you can, but someone always keeps watch. Despite her concern, Olivia's exhaustion won out. She lay down on the grass, using her folded shawl as a pillow, and was asleep almost instantly. When she awoke, the sun was higher in the sky, and Dane was sitting nearby, whittling a small piece of wood with a pocket knife. He noticed her stirring and tucked the knife away. Feeling better? He asked. Olivia nodded, sitting up and smoothing her hair. Much, thank you. How long did I sleep? About 3 hours. Figured you needed it. He stood and offered her a hand up. We should get moving if we want to reach the ranch by midday. They resumed their journey, with Dane insisting on continuing to lead the horse while Olivia rode. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled, the open prairie giving way to gently rolling hills dotted with stands of pine and aspen. In the distance, The jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains dominated the western horizon. As the sun reached its zenith, they crested a hill, and Dane paused, pointing ahead. There it is, Reid Ranch. Olivia followed his gaze and saw a small valley below them. A modest cabin stood near a crystal-clear stream, with several outbuildings clustered nearby. A corral held a few horses, and beyond that, she could see cattle grazing on the hillsides. It wasn't grand by any means, but there was an undeniable charm to the neat, well-maintained property. It's lovely, she said sincerely. A hint of color rose in Dane's weathered cheeks at her praise. It's home, he said simply, but the affection in his voice was unmistakable. They made their way down to the ranch, and as they approached, Olivia noticed details she hadn't been able to see from a distance. The carefully tended vegetable garden beside the cabin, the wildflowers growing along the split-rail fence, the smoke curling from the stone chimney. Looks like Mrs. Wilkins has been by, Dane commented, noticing the smoke. I asked the station master to let her know I was heading back today. As if on cue, the cabin door opened, and a plump, gray-haired woman stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face broke into a warm smile when she saw them. Daniel Reid, about time you got back, she called. Then her eyes widened when she noticed Olivia. And you've brought company. Dane led them into the yard and helped Olivia dismount before making introductions. Mrs. Wilkins, this is Miss Olivia Matthews. She had some trouble on the trail, and I offered her a place to rest until she can continue to her homestead. Miss Matthews, this is Martha Wilkins, the finest baker in the territory and my nearest neighbor. Mrs. Wilkins clasped Olivia's hands warmly. Any friend of Dane's is welcome here, dear. You look exhausted, poor thing. Come inside. I've got stew simmering and fresh bread just out of the oven. The mention of real food made Olivia's mouth water, and she allowed herself to be led into the cabin while Dane tended to the horses. The interior was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, a solid wooden table with 4 chairs, a small bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes, and a rocking chair by the window. Everything was spotlessly clean, with touches that spoke of care. A colorful quilt draped over the back of the rocking chair, dried wildflowers in a tin can on the table, hand-carved wooden pegs by the door for hanging coats and hats. Sit, Mrs. Wilkins urged, guiding Olivia to the table. You look like you could use a proper meal. Olivia didn't need to be told twice. The aroma of the stew was making her light-headed with hunger. Mrs. Wilkins ladled a generous portion into a bowl, added a thick slice of bread slathered with butter, and placed it before her. Eat slowly now, the older woman cautioned. Your stomach needs to remember what real food is. Olivia nodded, forcing herself to take small, measured bites despite wanting to devour everything in sight. The stew was rich with tender chunks of beef, potatoes, and carrots, seasoned perfectly with herbs Olivia couldn't identify, but that reminded her of her mother's cooking. Dane entered a few minutes later, having seen to the horses. He washed up at the basin by the door before joining Olivia at the table. Mrs. Wilkins served him an even larger portion, which he accepted with obvious appreciation. You're a saint, Martha, he said after his first bite. Trail rations make a man forget what real food tastes like. Mrs. Wilkins beamed at the compliment. Well, someone has to make sure you eat properly. You'd live on jerky and coffee if left to your own devices. As they ate, Dane explained to Mrs. Wilkins how he had found Olivia and her circumstances. The older woman clucked sympathetically. Homesteading alone is no easy task, dear, she said to Olivia. My Harold and I came out here 15 years ago, and even with the 2 of us, those first years were brutal. But the land gives back what you put into it, eventually. Mrs. Wilkins's farm is the most productive in the valley, Dane added. She supplies half the vegetables sold in Fort Collins. The older woman waved off the praise. Only because this one helped clear the north field after Harold passed. Wouldn't have managed without neighbors like Dane. Olivia observed the easy rapport between them, sensing a deep mutual respect. It gave her a glimpse into the community she was entering, different from the formal social structures of her Eastern upbringing, but no less meaningful. After the meal, Mrs. Wilkins insisted on showing Olivia to the spare bedroom while Dane unloaded her belongings. The room was small but neat, with a narrow bed covered in another handmade quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, and a small chest of drawers. I aired it out and put fresh linens on the bed, Mrs. Wilkins explained. The chest is empty if you want to unpack your things. Thank you, Olivia said, touched by the woman's thoughtfulness. And thank you for coming over. I know this is an unusual situation. Mrs. Wilkins patted her hand. Daniel Reid is the most honorable man I know, dear. When he sent word asking me to come by, because he was bringing a young lady who needed help, I didn't think twice. She lowered her voice confidentially. Besides, it does my heart good to see him with company. Man spends too much time alone. Before Olivia could respond to that observation, Dane appeared in the doorway with her bags. Where would you like these, Miss Matthews? Just inside the door is fine, thank you, she replied, suddenly aware of how small the room felt with his tall frame filling the doorway. Mrs. Wilkins glanced between them with a knowing smile that made Olivia blush inexplicably. Well, I should be getting back to my own place before dark. I've left enough food to last you both a few days, Dane. You didn't need to do that, Martha, he protested. Nonsense. Your pantry was probably bare as bones after your trip, she retorted, then turned to Olivia. I'll come by tomorrow afternoon if you'd like some company, dear. Maybe bring some of my preserves. That would be lovely, Olivia said sincerely, already warming to the motherly woman. After Mrs. Wilkins departed, an awkward silence fell between Olivia and Dane. They were suddenly very aware of being alone together in his home, a situation neither had anticipated just 24 hours earlier. You must be tired, Dane said finally. Feel free to rest. The washroom is through that door if you'd like to freshen up. I'll be outside tending to chores if you need anything. Thank you, Olivia replied, grateful for his consideration. For everything. He nodded once, then left her to settle in. Alone for the first time since their meeting, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the dramatic turn her journey had taken. Instead of struggling alone on the prairie, possibly facing starvation, she was now in a comfortable cabin with a full stomach, thanks to the kindness of a stranger. Exhaustion soon overtook her reflections, and after washing her face and hands, Olivia laid down on the bed, intending only to rest briefly. Instead, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she awoke, the light streaming through the small window had changed, taking on the golden quality of late afternoon. Disoriented at first, Olivia took a moment to remember where she was. The sound of chopping wood outside helped anchor her to reality. She rose, smoothed her rumpled dress as best she could, and combed her fingers through her tangled auburn hair before venturing out of the bedroom. The main room was empty, but the door stood open, letting in fresh air and the rhythmic sound of an axe striking wood. Olivia moved to the doorway and paused, watching as Dane split logs with powerful, practiced swings. He had removed his coat in the warmth of the afternoon, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle from years of physical labor. His movements were efficient, each strike precise, betraying none of the fatigue he must have felt after their long journey. As if sensing her presence, Dane paused and looked up, wiping sweat from his brow with his sleeve. Hope I didn't wake you, he said, embedding the axe in the chopping block. Not at all, Olivia assured him. I've slept far longer than I intended. I should be helping, not resting the day away. Dane shook his head. You needed the rest. Besides, there'll be plenty to do tomorrow and the days after. He gathered an armful of split logs. I'm just stocking the wood box. Nights get cool, even in summer. Olivia stepped aside as he carried the wood into the cabin and stacked it neatly in a box beside the fireplace. She noticed that while she slept, he had brought in the rest of her belongings from his horse and arranged them carefully by her bedroom door. I thought we might ride over to your wagon tomorrow, Dane said as he straightened up. See what else we can salvage. If it's all right with you, I can have a look at your homestead papers too, get a better idea of where your uncle's place is located. Of course, Olivia agreed. I'd appreciate your insights. I've never actually seen the property myself. Dane nodded. Most of the land along the Poudre is good, but some areas flood in the spring. Better to know what you're getting into. He moved to the wash basin to clean his hands. Are you hungry? Martha left enough food for an army. They shared a simple but delicious supper of leftover stew, fresh bread, and stewed apples. As they ate, Dane asked Olivia about her life back east, listening attentively as she described her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's work as a schoolteacher, and her mother's talents as a seamstress. They sound like good people, he commented when she mentioned how they had taken in students who couldn't afford their education. They were, Olivia agreed, a pang of grief still sharp despite the months that had passed. They taught me that wealth isn't measured in money, but in how you treat others. She looked up at him. They would have appreciated your kindness to me. Dane seemed uncomfortable with her gratitude, shifting slightly in his chair. Just doing what anyone would do. Not anyone, Olivia countered softly. Many would have ridden past. To change the subject, she asked about his ranch, how he had built it, his plans for expansion, the challenges he faced. Dane opened up gradually, his initial terseness giving way to more detailed explanations as he warmed to the topic. His passion for his land was evident in every word, and Olivia found herself captivated by his vision for the future. Sorry, he said finally, noticing how long he had been talking. Don't often get a chance to bend someone's ear about cattle breeding and irrigation systems. Olivia smiled. I asked because I wanted to know. If I'm to be a landowner myself, I should learn from those with experience. The conversation flowed more easily after that, and they talked until the last light faded from the sky. Dane lit a lamp and stoked the fire against the evening chill. The warm glow cast dancing shadows around the room, creating an intimate atmosphere that made Olivia acutely aware of how alone they were. As if sensing her sudden discomfort, Dane stood. I should turn in. Dawn comes early, and there's always work waiting. He hesitated, then added, if you need anything in the night, my room is just past the kitchen. Don't hesitate to wake me. Thank you, but I'm sure I'll be fine, Olivia assured him, also rising from her chair. Good night, Mr. Reid. Dane, he corrected gently. Out here, formalities don't last long. Dane, she repeated, testing the name. Then you must call me Olivia. A small smile touched his lips. Good night, Olivia. He retreated to his room, leaving her alone by the fire. Olivia remained there for a time, watching the flames and reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this cabin. Finally, fatigue drew her back to her own room, where she changed into her nightgown and slipped beneath the quilt. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, she fell asleep quickly, lulled by the absolute silence of the countryside and the sense of security that Dane's presence provided. The next few days established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Olivia woke each morning to find Dane already at work, having been up since before dawn, tending to the livestock. She insisted on taking over the cooking duties, despite his protests that she was a guest, and discovered a small but well-stocked pantry thanks to Mrs. Wilkins's foresight. True to his word, Dane took Olivia to retrieve more of her belongings from the wagon on their second day. They found it undisturbed, and with Dane's help, she was able to salvage most of the items she had reluctantly left behind. He examined her homestead papers carefully, nodding with approval at the location. Your uncle chose well, he confirmed. It's about 15 miles northeast of here, near where the Poudre meets Box Elder Creek. Good water, good soil, some timber on the north edge. You'll have neighbors within a few miles, the Hendersons to the east and the Thompsons to the north. You know them? Olivia asked, encouraged by the news. Good people. Henderson has 3 boys who can help with heavy work if you need it. Mrs. Thompson is known for her midwifery skills. He folded the papers carefully and returned them to her. You could do a lot worse for neighbors. As they rode back to the ranch, Olivia found herself studying Dane's profile against the backdrop of his land. In just a few days, her perception of him had evolved from that of a trail-worn stranger to a man of substance, thoughtful, hard-working, and possessed of a quiet integrity that commanded respect without demanding it. Mrs. Wilkins visited regularly, bringing fresh vegetables from her garden and staying for lengthy conversations over coffee. Olivia noticed that she often created reasons to leave them alone together, her matchmaking intentions becoming increasingly transparent. Rather than feeling embarrassed, Olivia found herself grateful for the older woman's efforts, though she tried not to examine that gratitude too closely. On the 4th day, Dane announced that Jenny's leg was showing signs of improvement. She'll never pull a wagon again, he said as they examined the mare together in the corral. But with proper care, she could be a fine riding horse by next spring. That's wonderful news, Olivia said, stroking the horse's neck affectionately. Dane hesitated, then added, I've been thinking. Your homestead is good land, but starting from scratch is hard enough with help. Alone, with winter coming in a few months. He trailed off, choosing his next words carefully. You'd be welcome to stay here until spring. Give yourself time to prepare properly, learn more about the territory, maybe save up for supplies. Olivia was taken aback by the offer. I couldn't impose on you for months, Dane. It's not an imposition, he countered. Place is too big for just one person anyway, and I could use the help. Martha's been telling me for years I need someone to keep the house in order while I'm working the ranch. He quickly added, you'd have your own room, of course, and Martha would continue to visit regularly. The practical side of Olivia recognized the wisdom in his suggestion. Arriving at her homestead with winter approaching would be foolhardy at best, potentially fatal at worst. She had limited funds remaining, and building a shelter sturdy enough to withstand the harsh Colorado winter would require resources she didn't currently possess. Yet there was another aspect to consider, one that had nothing to do with practicality and everything to do with the growing warmth she felt in Dane's presence. Staying would mean months in close proximity to a man who was still, in many ways, a stranger, but one who increasingly occupied her thoughts. I would insist on working, she said finally. Not just in the house, but learning about ranching too. If I'm to run my own homestead someday, I need to understand this land. Relief flashed across Dane's face, quickly replaced by his usual reserve. That seems fair. Though I should warn you, ranch work isn't like anything you've known before. I'm a quick learner, Olivia replied with determination. And so their temporary arrangement extended indefinitely. Summer gave way to autumn, bringing crisp mornings and golden aspen leaves that shimmered in the breeze. Olivia proved true to her word, throwing herself into learning everything she could about ranch life. She rose before dawn with Dane, prepared hearty breakfasts, then joined him for the morning chores. At first, Dane was protective, assigning her only the lightest tasks. But Olivia's persistence wore down his reservations, and soon she was helping with everything from feeding livestock to mending fences. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned despite her bonnet, and her Eastern dresses were gradually replaced by more practical attire sewn from fabric Mrs. Wilkins brought from town. For his part, Dane seemed to thrive with her presence. The quiet, solitary man she had first met gradually revealed a dry sense of humor, a love of reading that matched her own, and a depth of knowledge about the land that left her in awe. In the evenings, after chores were done, they would sit by the fire, sometimes reading aloud to each other from his small collection of books, sometimes simply talking about their days. Mrs. Wilkins watched their evolving relationship with poorly concealed delight, often remarking on how the ranch seemed more alive these days. When she visited, she brought not just food and supplies, but also local news, keeping them connected to the wider community that Olivia was slowly becoming a part of. It was during one such visit in late October that Mrs. Wilkins mentioned the upcoming Harvest Festival in Fort Collins. The whole county turns out, she explained as she helped Olivia preserve the last of the garden vegetables. Dancing, food, games for the children. You two should come. Would do you good to socialize a bit. Dane, who was repairing a chair at the table, looked up. Got too much to do before winter sets in, Martha. The older woman fixed him with a stern look. Daniel Reid, that ranch won't fall apart if you take one day off. Besides, Olivia should meet more people if she's going to settle in these parts. Olivia, who had been secretly hoping to attend, kept her eyes on the jar she was filling. It does sound nice, she ventured, but I understand if there's too much work. Dane glanced between the two women, clearly outnumbered. Suppose we could spare a day, he conceded finally. If the weather holds. Mrs. Wilkins beamed triumphantly. Wonderful. It's settled then. She turned to Olivia with a conspiratorial smile. Now, about what you'll wear. In the days leading up to the festival, an unexpected nervousness took hold of Olivia. Though she had grown comfortable in Dane's company at the ranch, the prospect of appearing alongside him in public felt significant in a way she wasn't prepared to analyze too closely. With Mrs. Wilkins's help, she altered one of her better dresses a deep green wool that brought out the color of her eyes. The older woman insisted on lending her a lace collar that had belonged to her daughter, to add a special touch. The morning of the festival dawned clear and cool, with the promise of a beautiful autumn day. Dane, who had been uncharacteristically quiet at breakfast, disappeared after the meal and returned an hour later having shaved his usual stubble and donned his best shirt and coat. His hair, usually hidden beneath his hat, was neatly combed, the silver at his temples catching the sunlight through the window. When Olivia emerged from her room in her refurbished dress, her hair arranged in a style more elaborate than her usual practical braid, Dane's expression made her cheeks warm. He didn't speak for a moment, just looked at her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "You look beautiful," he said finally, the words simple but sincere. "Thank you," she replied softly. "You clean up rather well yourself." The ride to Fort Collins took most of the morning, but the weather remained perfect, crisp enough for comfort, but with bright sunshine that warmed their faces. They traveled in Dane's wagon, which he had cleaned thoroughly for the occasion. The conversation flowed easily between them, punctuated by comfortable silences as they admired the autumn landscape. Fort Collins was bustling with activity when they arrived. The main street was decorated with harvest symbols, corn stalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorned the storefronts, and a large area had been cleared for dancing. Tables laden with food lined one side of the square, while various games and contests were set up on the other. As they made their way through the crowd, Olivia was surprised by how many people greeted Dane warmly. Though he had described himself as something of a loner, it was clear he was well respected in the community. Several people expressed curiosity about her, and Dane introduced her simply as Miss Matthews, whose homesteading near Box Elder Creek. If anyone wondered about their exact relationship, they were too polite to ask directly, though Olivia noticed speculative glances and whispered conversations in their wake. They joined Mrs. Wilkins at the food tables, where she was proudly displaying her prize-winning apple pies. She immediately began introducing Olivia to what seemed like half the county merchants, farmers, ranchers, and their families. Everyone was welcoming, many offering advice about homesteading or promises of help when she finally moved to her own land. "The Hendersons were asking after you," Mrs. Wilkins informed Dane. "They're over by the horseshoe competition." "I should go say hello," Dane replied. He turned to Olivia. "Would you like to come along? They'll be your nearest neighbors when you settle your homestead." Olivia was about to agree when Mrs. Wilkins interjected. "Oh, I need Olivia's help with organizing the dessert table. You go on, Dane. We'll catch up later." As soon as Dane was out of earshot, Mrs. Wilkins abandoned all pretense of needing help. "That man is smitten with you," she declared, adjusting a plate of cookies that was already perfectly aligned. "Martha," Olivia protested, glancing around to make sure no one had overheard. "He's simply been kind enough to offer me shelter until spring." The older woman gave her a knowing look. "I've known Daniel Reid for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you when you're not watching. And don't think I haven't noticed how your eyes follow him around the room." Olivia felt her face flush. Was she that transparent? "It's complicated," she said finally. "I came west to be independent, to make my own way. Not to—" She trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought. "Not to fall in love," Mrs. Wilkins supplied gently. "Dear girl, the two aren't mutually exclusive. Finding a partner who respects your strength doesn't diminish it." She patted Olivia's hand. "Just something to consider." Before Olivia could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of more festival-goers bearing dishes for the communal table. The conversation shifted to more general topics, but Mrs. Wilkins's words lingered in Olivia's mind. When Dane returned, he was accompanied by a family he introduced as the Hendersons, a hardy farmer, his wife, and their 3 sons, the youngest about 16, the oldest in his early 20s. All 3 boys seemed immediately taken with Olivia, offering to show her around the festival with an eagerness that made their mother roll her eyes affectionately. "Boys, give Miss Matthews room to breathe," Mrs. Henderson chided, then turned to Olivia with a warm smile. "But do know you're welcome to visit any time. We're not far from your uncle's old place, and starting a homestead alone is no small task." "Thank you," Olivia replied sincerely. "I may take you up on that offer come spring." The conversation continued pleasantly until the band began tuning up, signaling the start of the dancing. The youngest Henderson boy immediately asked Olivia for the first dance, his freckled face flushing with courage as his brothers egged him on. Caught off guard, Olivia glanced at Dane, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I'd be delighted," she told the boy, whose name was Jacob. The dance was a lively reel that Olivia remembered from social gatherings back east. Young Jacob was enthusiastic if not particularly graceful, but his genuine enjoyment was infectious. When the music ended, his oldest brother cut in for the next dance, followed by various other young men who had noticed the newcomer. Olivia enjoyed herself more than she had expected, though she couldn't help glancing occasionally to where Dane stood at the edge of the dancing area, watching with an unreadable expression. After several dances, she begged a break, fanning herself as she made her way back to where Mrs. Wilkins was chatting with some friends. "You're quite the belle of the ball," the older woman observed with a smile. "Half the young men in the county are smitten." "They're just being welcoming," Olivia demurred, taking a cup of cider that was offered to her. Mrs. Wilkins replied skeptically. "And I suppose that's why Dane looks like he's considering buying a shotgun." Olivia choked slightly on her cider. "He does not," she protested, though when she glanced in his direction, she had to admit there was a certain tension in his posture as he watched another young man approaching her with clear intentions of requesting a dance. Before the would-be suitor could reach her, however, the band struck up a slower tune, a waltz that would have been considered somewhat scandalous in proper Eastern circles, but was apparently acceptable on the frontier. To Olivia's surprise, Dane himself stepped forward, nodding politely to the disappointed young man before turning to her. "May I have this dance?" he asked formally, extending his hand. Olivia felt a flutter of anticipation as she placed her hand in his. "I'd be honored." As he led her onto the dance floor, she realized this was the first time they had touched beyond the incidental contact of daily work. His hand was warm and calloused against hers, his palm broad and encompassing. When he placed his other hand at her waist and drew her slightly closer, she had to remind herself to breathe. "I didn't know you danced," she said as they began to move with the music. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet." The simple, yet, held a promise that made her pulse quicken. They moved together with surprising ease, as if their bodies had learned each other's rhythms during the months of working side by side. Dane was a more accomplished dancer than she had expected, guiding her confidently through the steps. "Where did you learn to waltz?" she asked, genuinely curious. "My mother," he replied, a softness entering his voice at the memory. "She insisted my brother and I learn, said every gentleman should know how to dance properly. Made us practice with each other until we got it right." Tom always complained, but I secretly enjoyed it. It was a glimpse into his past that he rarely offered, and Olivia treasured it. "She taught you well." As they continued to dance, the rest of the crowded square seemed to fade away. Olivia was acutely aware of the warmth of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the intensity in his blue eyes when they met hers. Something was shifting between them, something that had been building gradually over their months together, but now demanded acknowledgement. When the music finally ended, Dane didn't immediately release her hand. Instead, he asked quietly, "Would you like to take a walk? It's rather warm in here." Olivia nodded, suddenly eager for a moment away from the crowd and the speculative glances they were attracting. Dane offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him as he guided her through the throng and out into the cool evening air. They walked in companionable silence for a time, following a path that led away from the main square toward a small park at the edge of town. The sounds of the festival gradually faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. The sun had set, but a full moon provided ample light, casting everything in a silvery glow. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Dane asked eventually, breaking the silence. "Very much," Olivia replied honestly. "Everyone has been so welcoming." "Especially the Henderson boys," he observed, a hint of something that might have been jealousy coloring his tone. Olivia glanced up at him, trying to read his expression in the moonlight. "They were kind," she agreed carefully, "but I was hoping for a dance with you all evening." The admission hung between them, more revealing than she had intended. Dane stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "Olivia," he began, then paused, as if gathering his thoughts. "These past months, having you at the ranch, it's been—" "Yes?" she prompted gently when he faltered. "I never expected to share my life with anyone again," he continued, his voice low and intense. "After the war, after losing Tom, I figured being alone was my lot. The ranch was enough. But now, he took a deep breath. The thought of you leaving come spring, of the cabin being empty again, I find I can't bear it. Olivia's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. Dane, she whispered, scarcely daring to hope she understood his meaning correctly. He took her hands in his touch gentle despite the strength she knew those hands possessed. I'm not a man of fancy words, Olivia. I can't offer you the kind of life you might have had back east. But everything I have, everything I am, is yours if you want it. If you consider staying, not as a guest, but as my wife. The declaration, simple and heartfelt, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. All her carefully constructed plans for independence seemed suddenly less important than the future this man was offering, not one where she surrendered her dreams, but where they built something together, as equals. I came west to find my own place, she said softly. I never expected that place would be with someone else. She squeezed his hands. But these months with you have shown me that sharing a dream doesn't diminish it. It makes it stronger. Hope dawned in Dane's eyes. Is that a yes? Instead of answering with words, Olivia rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Dane's arms encircled her, drawing her close against him. His lips were warm and surprisingly soft, his embrace secure without being confining. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Olivia's smile held all the answer he needed. Yes, she confirmed anyway, her voice steady with certainty. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll be your wife. Joy transformed Dane's usually solemn features, making him look younger, lighter. He lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace that drew a startled laugh from her before setting her gently back on the ground. We should probably return to the festival before Martha sends out a search party, Olivia suggested, though she was reluctant to leave this perfect moment. Dane nodded, but before they turned back, he cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her once more, sealing their commitment under the vast Colorado sky. When they returned to the festival, hand in hand, Mrs. Wilkins took one look at their faces and immediately deduced what had transpired. Her triumphant, "I knew it," drew curious glances from nearby revelers, and soon congratulations were being offered from all sides. The news spread quickly through the gathering, and the evening transformed into an impromptu celebration of their engagement. Later, as they rode home beneath a canopy of stars, Olivia rested her head against Dane's shoulder, a contentment she had never known before filling her heart. What had begun as a desperate encounter on the prairie, a hungry traveler and a weary cowboy sharing meager supplies, had blossomed into something neither could have anticipated, but both now recognized as the greatest blessing of their lives. The preparations for their wedding occupied much of November. Mrs. Wilkins took charge of organizing the event, insisting it should take place at the ranch rather than in town, since that's where your life together will be. Neighbors and new friends rallied around, offering help, food, and handmade gifts for the couple. Olivia wrote to her few remaining relatives back east, not expecting them to make the arduous journey, but wanting to share her happiness. To her surprise, her mother's sister, Aunt Beatrice, replied with plans to visit in the spring, expressing delight that Olivia had found love in her new home. As the wedding day approached, Dane worked tirelessly to ensure the ranch was at its best. He repainted the cabin, built new furniture including a larger bed for their room, and with the help of the Henderson boys, constructed a proper bathing room off the kitchen, a luxury Olivia hadn't expected but deeply appreciated. They were married on the first Sunday of December, with the mountains providing a majestic backdrop to the simple ceremony. The ranch yard was transformed with evergreen boughs, ribbons, and lanterns that would illuminate the celebration once darkness fell. Despite the winter chill, the sun shone brilliantly, as if blessing their union. Olivia wore a dress of deep blue wool that Mrs. Wilkins and several other women had helped her make, adorned with lace from her mother's wedding gown that she had brought west as a memento. Dane, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him, waited for her outside the cabin, dressed in a new suit that made him look both distinguished and somewhat uncomfortable. The local minister officiated, his words about partnership and perseverance particularly fitting for a couple beginning their life together on the frontier. When Dane slipped a simple gold band onto Olivia's finger, a family heirloom that had been his mother's, and promised to love and cherish her all his days, the certainty in his voice brought tears to her eyes. Their first kiss as husband and wife was met with cheers and a few good-natured whistles from the gathered community. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. When the last guests finally departed, with Mrs. Wilkins being ushered home by the Hendersons despite her protests that there was still cleaning to be done, Dane and Olivia found themselves alone for the first time as a married couple. Standing in the main room of what was now truly their home, Dane took Olivia's hands in his expression tender in the firelight. "Happy, Mrs. Reid?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully, rising on her toes to kiss him. That night, as they learned each other in the most intimate way, their connection deepened into something profound and unbreakable. Dane's touch was gentle yet passionate, his care for her pleasure revealing yet another facet of the man she had married. In his arms, Olivia discovered a kind of freedom she had never anticipated, the freedom to be fully herself, fully loved. The winter passed in a contented blur as they settled into married life. The days were filled with the necessary work of maintaining the ranch through the cold months, while the nights were spent in cozy companionship by the fire or in the private warmth of their bed. They read to each other, shared stories from their pasts, and made plans for the future. Dane proved to be a patient teacher as Olivia continued learning the skills she would need as a rancher's wife, and she in turn brought new ideas and perspectives that enhanced their shared life. When spring finally arrived, bringing with it the renewal of the land and the busy season of calving, they made the journey to Olivia's homestead claim. The property, which had once represented her independent future, now held different possibilities. Together, they surveyed the land, discussing how it might complement the existing ranch if they were to develop it together. "We could run more cattle here," Dane observed as they stood on a rise overlooking the property. "Or maybe try horses. The grazing is good." Olivia nodded, seeing the potential through his experienced eyes. "And that flat area near the creek would be perfect for a larger garden than we have at home. Maybe even an orchard eventually." They decided to build a small cabin on the property that could serve as a line shack when working this part of their expanding ranch. With the help of neighbors, the structure went up quickly, solid and functional, if not as comfortable as their main home. Dane insisted on adding a stone fireplace similar to the one in their cabin, "So it feels like home when we're here." As their first anniversary approached, Olivia discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Dane with a mixture of joy and protective concern that Olivia found both touching and occasionally stifling. Mrs. Wilkins, now firmly established as a surrogate mother to them both, dispensed advice and folk remedies with equal enthusiasm, while the community rallied once again to support the expanding Reid family. Their daughter, Elizabeth Martha Reid, was born on a crisp autumn day in 1874, with Mrs. Wilkins and the local midwife attending. Dane, who had been banished to the porch during the delivery despite his protests, was summoned to meet his daughter as the first stars appeared in the evening sky. The sight of his weathered hands cradling the tiny infant, his blue eyes wide with wonder, became one of Olivia's most treasured memories. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the wisp of auburn hair that matched her mother's. Just like her mama. Life with a child brought new challenges and deeper joys to their marriage. Elizabeth, or Betsy, as she was soon nicknamed, thrived in the clean mountain air, growing into a curious, strong-willed toddler who adored her father and followed him everywhere she could. Dane, who had once believed his life would be solitary, embraced fatherhood with the same quiet dedication he brought to everything important. As the years passed, their family and their ranch continued to grow. A son, Thomas, joined them in 1876, followed by another daughter, Sarah, in 1879. Mrs. Wilkins, though advancing in years, remained a constant presence in their lives, delighting in her role as honorary grandmother. The hardships of frontier life, harsh winters, occasional drought, the constant work of maintaining and expanding their holdings were balanced by the deep satisfaction of building something lasting together. The community around them evolved as well, with Fort Collins growing into a proper town and new settlers arriving regularly. Olivia found herself frequently hosting newcomers, offering the same kindness to trail-weary travelers that Dane had once shown her. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Dane surprised Olivia with a trip back east to visit her remaining family. It was Betsy and Thomas's first journey on a train, an adventure that thrilled them as much as the chance to meet their great-aunt Beatrice. The 2 weeks in Pennsylvania were enjoyable, but by the end, all of them were eager to return to their mountain home. "It's beautiful here," Olivia acknowledged as they sat in her aunt's well-appointed parlor on their last evening. "But it's not home anymore." "No regrets?" Dane asked quietly, after the children had been put to bed. Olivia took his hand, the years of shared work visible in both their calloused palms. "Not one," she assured him. "That night when you found me, starving and alone, it seemed like the lowest point of my life. But now I see it was actually the beginning of everything good." Dane brought her hand to his lips. "I thank God every day that I saw your campfire." Their return to the ranch coincided with an unusually abundant spring. The cattle were fat, the garden flourished, and the expanded orchards they had planted on the homestead property began to bear their first real harvest. To celebrate, they hosted a community gathering that autumn, with tables groaning under the weight of food and children playing games in the same yard where they had exchanged their vows. As twilight fell and lanterns were lit, Olivia found herself standing in almost the exact spot where she had become Dane's wife. Her husband joined her, slipping an arm around her waist as they watched their children racing with the Henderson grandchildren around the yard. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, his voice still sending a pleasant warmth through her after all these years. "I was just thinking about how full our lives are," she replied, leaning into his solid presence. "When I headed west, I was searching for a place to belong, somewhere I could build a life of my own. I never imagined finding all this." Dane turned her gently to face him, his blue eyes as intense as they had been on that first night by her disabled wagon. "Do you remember what Martha told us once? That the land gives back what you put into it?" Olivia nodded, smiling at the memory of their dear friend, now slowed by age but still sharp of mind and tongue. "I think that's true of love too," Dane continued, his voice low and meant only for her. "What began with a shared meal has grown into this beautiful life because we've both poured ourselves into it." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch as tender as it had been when she was carrying their first child. "I love you more today than I did when I married you, Olivia Reid. And I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." In the golden light of the autumn evening, surrounded by the family and community they had built together, Olivia kissed her husband, the weary cowboy who had once shared his meager supplies with a hungry stranger, and in doing so had set them both on the path to a rich and abundant life neither could have imagined alone. As the years continued to pass, the Reid Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the region, known for its quality cattle and the warm hospitality of its owners. Dane and Olivia welcomed countless travelers, always remembering how their own story had begun with a simple act of kindness at Twilight. Their children grew strong and capable, each eventually finding their own path. Betsy, as a schoolteacher who married a local doctor, Thomas taking over the main operations of the expanding ranch, and Sarah surprising everyone by studying law in Denver before returning to Fort Collins to become one of the territory's first female attorneys. Even as Colorado achieved statehood and the Wild West gradually became tamer, with railroads connecting once isolated communities and new inventions bringing modern conveniences even to remote ranches, Dane and Olivia maintained the values that had sustained them through those early years: hard work, generosity, and unwavering commitment to each other and their land. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration that included nearly everyone in the county. The original cabin, now expanded and improved over the decades but still recognizable at its heart, was decorated with flowers from Olivia's gardens. A photographer from Fort Collins captured the extended family gathered on the porch, Dane and Olivia at the center, their silver hair and lined faces testament to years of sun and wind and laughter, surrounded by the living legacy they had created together. That evening, after the festivities had ended and their guests had departed, They stood arm in arm beneath the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting. "Did you ever imagine this?" Olivia asked, gesturing to the prosperous ranch around them, the evidence of a life well lived. Dane shook his head, his smile tender in the moonlight. "Not until I saw a beautiful woman sitting by a campfire, trying to be brave despite having run out of food and hope." He drew her close, his embrace still strong despite the passing years. "Best detour I ever took." Olivia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat that had become the rhythm of her life. "We've been blessed," she murmured. "Yes," Dane agreed simply. "We have." And in the quiet of the Colorado night, the love that had begun with a shared meal between strangers continued to nourish them both, a harvest more abundant than either could ever have planted alone.